everybody, and welcome back to another episode of In Love with AI. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Anders from the Foundry Ventures. Typically, when we start this podcast, we allow our guests to introduce themselves. So, Anders, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think for most people, most interesting bit is how do you end up in this job? It's a very cool place you're in.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot for having me. Really happy to be on the show. So I think I have a bit of a sort of an unusual journey into the VC space and into AI. So I have already been working for about 2 decades. I spent the first one in telecom in the Nordics and in Northern Europe, which was very, very sort of educating and really fun. So it was early 2000s. There was a lot of consolidation going on horizontally. You're adding more and more sort of horizontal offers to your core, maybe mobile telephone offering, right? You could add TV or broadband and whatnot. But then also sort of vertically, you sort of deepened into maybe fiber networks and things like that.
Oh,
And many of these operators also went global into Eastern Europe, into Asia, and whatnot. So I learned a lot, and that was really funny. But I was not an entrepreneur in that sense. I was more of a operator into these larger organizations. But
wow.
what I learned was the sort of the playbook of buy and build, acquiring companies, integrating the team and the offerings. And I also learned how a bit around how industries transform. So telecom has been from fixed telephony to mobile telephony, from charging for voice calls over to data consumption, etc. So the industry has been forced to survive over a couple of different transformations. So I sort of brought that from that era. But as you do, I got somewhat bored, and then I changed completely, and then into professional services, sort of consultancy agency space. And that was sort of where the true entrepreneurial journey started. So I was CEO of two different companies, and we sold both of them into groups that were sort of consolidating professional services industries in a couple of different dimensions. So they had maybe 1,000, 2,000 employees, but distributed into maybe 15, 20 different companies, different brands, and then sort of cooperated. So that was really popular here in sort of in the Nordics. I was part of that and learned a lot around running a company, founding a company, exiting a company, right? And sort of the dynamics in how you build value in sort of an asset over time. And then I left there after about 10 years, and then we sort of hit the ChatGPT moment. And on the back of fixed to mobile, sort of the mobile revolution, social media, cloud, and maybe something around sort of meta. The tech shifts you've seen, it wasn't that hard to realize that this is a big one. And big in the sense that it hits everywhere, right? Which mobile did and which maybe cloud didn't, right? So just decided to get into it.
Were you around the era when Spotify became this mega monster?
Yes, that was really interesting. So that was sort of at the tail end of my telecom years, and there was a lot of cooperation between Spotify and telcos in order to both secure a solid enough connection, mobile connection, right, to have a great product experience from Spotify, but also in terms of distribution, right? So one of the incumbents in Sweden, for example, they actually even purchased some equity into Spotify, set a cooperation, and then just distributed the product to their millions of users, right? So I was part of that era. And then we had a couple of other sort of successes in the Nordics. We had Klarna coming out. We had iZettle selling into PayPal. So we had a couple of those journeys, which really inspired the next sort of AI generation coming out of the Nordics right now.
Yeah, I'm very curious because I don't know what's, as I mentioned to you earlier, I lived in Sweden and studied in the north part of Sweden, and I loved it. I think there's a fantastic culture around being able to solve problems that is very, very Swedish. And I don't know what is it that is going on in Sweden, but I don't think we have had the opportunity to get companies the size of the ones that are being built in particularly in Sweden. I mean, we have companies here that made it to the unicorn level, but it's not that sort of huge scale that you only see these days in England or in the United States, of course, in China. I think the one and only exception to that is Sweden. Is there anything particular in culture that you think could be related to this?
I think we have benefited from a great foundation over decades, right? A high degree of engineers, a couple of solid old tech companies spinning out startups and whatnot. And then we were pretty early in terms of solid connectivity, mobile and fixed sort of fiber connectivity. And then we had a couple of early ones like Spotify in the early 2000s, mid 2000s that succeeded. I'm not sure that that was purely because we're awesome. I think it was a bit of a luck as well. But I think
No,
what
but yeah, you
happened
can.
afterwards was actually somewhat a product out of the culture. So it's not a culture in Sweden to be super successful and then, how should I put it, spend it all, right? It's
Yeah.
more of a, keep yourself, your feet on the ground, somewhat humble, pay back to the thing that enabled you to be successful, right? So more or less all of these successful entrepreneurs are big angel investors. They are running funds. They are really putting their money where their mouth is. And they're really being role models for the next and the next generation of entrepreneurs. So to some extent, they're sort of the enterprise version of rock stars, right? But not in the sense that they're sort of private jets, etc., but in the sense of actually continuing to try to sort of deliver on building stuff the way they started back in the days.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I mean, there's a history behind it. IKEA, of course, Sony Ericsson itself. There's there's almost like similarities to that. In regards to this era of AI, I think we're moving into this world of AI backed companies, and AI as a whole is changing a lot of the different elements. If you're advising companies or if you're helping younger entrepreneurs, what do you think is the core thing they need to have into consideration in order to fund and to develop or to create AI companies or AIs themselves?
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting question and one that I have changed my mind on quite substantially over the last 18 months. So historically, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I approached that question, which is central, right, or key, more that on the lines of, yes, this is a big technology shift, but how you build companies, how you find product market fit, the importance of awesome people in the beginning, the importance of being aligned with the classical venture journey, etc., is still the same, but it's a
Yeah.
platform shift, right?
Yeah.
And now I've truly sort of changed my mind that I think that in order to be successful now as a founder, you need to have a new mental model on how to build product and how to build companies. And in a couple of different dimensions, but I think the most important dimension is that, I mean, we're so hardwired, right, in trying to figure out the solution ourselves and then
Mm.
use tools to build the solution.
Mm.
I think the massive mental shift needed right now is that we need to start cooperating with AI to find the right problem and then build the solution to that problem, right?
Mm.
So, and that's the only way to have a decent rate of success. So if you have an approach or you still primarily base whatever analysis, whatever product market fit discussion, go to market, hiring, whatnot, primarily on yourself as an individual, right? I'm
Mm.
thinking through this myself and I'm trying to figure this out. Then you're less competitive than the other guy that is actually doing it together with AI.
Mm.
So rather than trying to figure stuff out, you need to be really sort of mentally prepared to, in every step of the journey, ask AI, bounce it off with AI, get
Mm.
input from AI on how to do things. Then you need to have your own taste, right? But
Yeah.
if you need to be really embedded here in order to be competitive, right? And this is
Yeah.
a culture thing. I mean, I find that myself, right? That eventually I've spent 20 minutes on something and then I realize that, Jesus, I should have bounced this off with Codex or Claude because I probably got 10 different cool angles, and then maybe I could have sort of figured it out, right?
Isn't that making people a little bit lazy then? I don't know. I'm still thinking in the regards to the fact that I love the craft of being able to create things. And there was a whole passion around the idea of, immersing in a problem and solving it. We really laying off that part of our ingenuity to artificial intelligence. And wouldn't that make us biased in regards to the kind of products and services that you do,
Yeah.
you build?
For me, it's completely the other way around.
Okay.
It keeps me sort of on the edge
Mm.
to a level that I've personally never been before. I'm constantly getting challenged by the AI, right, in new ways of thinking or in the importance of digging into stuff in detail. Not just sort of you're making a guess, right, on the back of something you potentially read 3 weeks ago, but really trying to sort of apply first principles and then understand what's sort of the core driver here and what's sort of the second or third order effect of that. So for me, it's the other way around. For me, it's more of a constant reminder of the fact that more or less everything is quite complicated if you're ambitious enough in truly understanding it, right? And then I think that sort of on the second question, that puts potentially even more pressure on you as
Yeah.
as an individual and as a founder, right? Because then you realize that all this stuff that I try to figure out myself isn't that unique. I mean, I
Yeah.
can ask the AI and it probably sort of pops up 80% of it in 10 seconds, right? Which means that I need to add some other type of a layer on top of this in order to stay competitive, right? Because everything else is a commodity. So for me, it's and I've heard it from many other people as well. It's the other way around. It's not forcing you to get lazy and just using it, because you immediately realize that if I get this answer, then 1 million other people get that today as well, which means that the output here is completely commoditized, right, and not a value in itself. I need to add something on top of it.
There's this aspect that many people are struggling with. There are, well, two aspects, and this is also a kind of like two-part question. The first aspect is the idea that AI is kind of replacing a lot of the typical tasks that we do, and that is creating companies that are smaller in size by nature, particularly those that call themselves AI natives, and they don't need to have complex systems, and they do a lot of different things, utilize AI through that process. But the second part of it is a lot of people say that this is not sustainable. In a way, that is actually going to generate a lot of job losses. What's your view on that? Because it's the never-ending question. I asked a lot of people because I really want to understand what's the perception. There's no clear answer from anyone.
Yeah, so I have actually a pretty clear view on it. The problem with having sort of clear views on how things will develop into the future is that you're most likely wrong, right? It's 100 different avenues that could be wrong, and then it's just one right. So
Yeah,
just by sort of statistical approach, you're most likely wrong. But my perspective is that over a longer time period, all humans will be pretty busy. Not with the things we do today, but with other things. I'm, however, pretty worried about that transition period, because I think that the time of change, the pace of the change now is probably 10x faster than the society as a whole, our sort of school system, enterprises, the balance between startups and incumbents and whatnot are able to adjust, right? So I think we're on the way to move into a couple of years that will be pretty messy. To some extent, there will be peaks of job losses, and maybe they will sort of do other things, but it's going to be somewhat messy. But over time, we'll figure it out. We'll start new companies and do new things, right?
yeah,
But I strongly believe that most people have not realized how fast the capabilities to do real work are developing now within AI. They tried it out about a year ago. They had some hallucination. It couldn't really produce anything other than images or copy. And as you know, we're way past that now. Codex and Cowork and Claude Code, they are exceptionally capable of doing real white collar labor, right? Executing things if you use them the right way. And when organizations, large and small, realizes that, they will clearly become smaller and more efficient.
Yeah, the idea of robotics coming into place, taking also blue collar jobs, AI companies like Claude and Anthropic, OpenAI, and so on, taking away white collar jobs feels like there's no space for people in a way. And this is one of the biggest questions, particularly for VCs, because obviously you guys are looking into the future and which will be the next economy to invest on. What is that next economy looking like? How can we actually find purpose and new opportunities in the world where it seems like everything can be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So personally, I believe that if you look at the existing companies today as a cohort, they will employ way less people a couple of years from now. So there's no, in my world, there are no sort of outcomes here where they will have a similar amount of FTEs or even less more. So they will have way less FTEs. I think the way to mitigate that is to very dramatically increase how fast we launch new companies. Because what AI enabled us to do is to solve a completely new set of problems that weren't possible to solve before. And in order to solve them for real people, then you need to have a real company. Maybe that company doesn't necessarily need to be 10,000 people. Maybe they can be 25 people. But if you have a couple of millions of those companies going after a couple of problems, a couple of million problems that we weren't able to solve before, then you have that sort of mitigation into that. And the challenge here, I think, is that we need to agree on that to some extent, and then as a society and as a business sort of ecosystem, really do whatever we can to even further enable these startups to thrive, because that's where the jobs will be created that would sort of mitigate the job loss in the existing cohort.
Yeah, so you believe the pie is going to expand, or
I
do you
believe
think
that
the pie is going to
in
change?
terms of number of people having a job,
Yeah.
it could potentially expand, but it could definitely be the same, if I mean.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen by itself. That will
Yeah.
require an alignment around the fact that the jobs will not be created in the existing companies, because the efficiency potential of AI and robotics, it's going to happen way, way faster than those companies will be able to innovate new products or new features that could actually sort of employ people. So I think those will happen in the startups.
Yeah. I have a theory. Bear with me for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I think that the pie is going to change. It's going to expand, but it's not going to expand the way we see it. So you remember that specific moment with Salesforce stock dropped because Anthropic launched a new model, and that was the first time that an event that was not war or a particular economic recession or something would be generating such buzz in the stock market. So that was interesting to watch. But at the same time, I realized for myself, actually being a user of Salesforce, I was thinking it makes no sense for a company having to pay the amount of money you pay for a CRM when you're able to build it and customize it for your specific needs using this technology. And somehow I feel that the opportunity is moving towards getting away from these mega companies in which potentially the Microsoft of this world will start to disappear. And we're going to see a lot of smaller companies taking a new position. So the kind of like monopoly story disappears. And then we see a lot of smaller entities doing similar work, having more competitors perhaps, but having a completely different capability and also size, which might be true or not, but it kind of changes the status quo entirely. And so the idea that we will not have these huge companies, but a few AI massive LLMs that are essentially enabling all of that changes the picture. How do you see that from a human identity standpoint? How do we, if my hypothesis is true, and I think a lot of VCs believe that that's kind of like happening. You see a lot of smaller companies, some of them make it, some of them disappear overnight because an LLM takes that. But one of the aspects that it's kind of worrying is the humans won't. People will stay. How do we maintain ourselves capable of confronting this new reality? Because we talked earlier about job losses, right? Now we're saying anyone can create a company. Now we're saying the traditional path of your career is no longer the case. It's not like you study, you go to work, and then you pension, and that's it. All of that is up for grabs. It's a complete change. How can we think about as humans to face this crazy reality? And I know it's a very loaded question.
But I think I have a pretty strong opinion here. So I think it boils down to incentivizing people to start using the tools. So I can sort of go back to myself here. So I realized, like everyone else, that it was a bit of a December 2025 kind of a moment in terms of Claude and Codex and the capabilities. And all of a sudden, coding really worked, right? And then I realized that, okay, I'm not an engineer, but my role is to invest in a lot of these tech companies. I need to roll up my sleeves and understand its way better. So I've spent a couple of 100 hours over the last 5 months building things, really digging into both Codex and Cloud Code. And I think that when doing so, you realize a lot of things. You can learn a lot of things. You can learn a lot of new things, and at the same time, you realize what a massive force of change this is.
Yeah.
If we can get people to use the tools, to get on board with the fact that this is a really big change, but for the positive, if on top of it, I can maybe learn something new, I can together with AI join a new company doing a new thing, etc. And I think that's the way. I don't think we can expect society, the government, not even maybe the school system here to fast enough be able to get people on board with how it works, why it's good, what the limitations are, and what that potentially can mean for change for me as an individual. I used to work in customer service maybe for a telco, but now I realize that the thing that I've dreamt about, being a digital artist or being an author or maybe even turning into an engineer, right, building stuff, that can happen now.
That can happen. That
When
is
you
great.
get that sort of culture into a big enough proportion of a society, then you get this sort of flywheel, I believe.
So that's interesting. I agree with you, by the way. I think there's a process of identity change that was not possible before. A lot of people, the way the society has built it is that you are very much attached to the job that you decide. You're a musician. It's not like you play music, you're a musician, or you're a lawyer, or you're an engineer, and that was that, right? I have this mindset, this is my personality. And now with these new tools that are speeding up the processes, you feel like, wait a minute, I can actually do something that would have taken me 10 years to learn beforehand, even becoming a doctor, which is incredibly crazy that we are getting to that point. So it feels like the end of professions per se. Professions become, the way Claude describes it, skills or interactions, right? And this is actually like a new frontier, a completely new paradigm where every individual can be truly absolutely what they want. But that's not what we hear from the AI companies. The AI companies are not selling this beautiful dream that you and I are painting at the moment. They're selling AGI. They're saying that everybody will have to have universal income and that we are facing a recession. Where do you sit? Do you think they're just trying to scare us in order to force us to use these tools? Do you think this is a marketing trick? Do you think there's reality to it? Where do you see it?
No, honestly, I have some sort of intellectual challenges with trying to visualize a world where we as humans completely lose the initiative in terms of intelligence, right? So I agree with AI companies in that sense that if you try to imagine a world where you have sort of an endless intelligence or abundance in intelligence, then it's really hard to try to sort of figure out what actually happens, right? I have a very profound bullish or positive situation on an aggregate here. So I think that there are some theories that you need some kind of a universal basic income. I have a hard time seeing how the level of wealth in the society as a whole will be challenges. I think that will be exponentially growing, right? Because our capabilities is growing so fast. Then it's a distribution or redistribution problem, right? Because it's going to be the wealth creation will be in a very, very small subset of society, right? It will not be evenly distributed, right? So it's going to be about distribution, but as a whole, we will have a dramatically improved sort of wealth as a society, level of quality of life, medicines, robots that can support elderly care, safer cars, more advanced med tech. The level will be dramatically increased, but we need to figure out a good enough and fair enough both to the builders and to the non-builders in terms of how we distribute this, right?
When you guys think about investing in companies, what are you looking for? Is it the idea, the teams, that they're future-proofing
a couple of things have
themselves?
changed, right? So I think that in terms of what we're looking for, I mean, typically you had, I'm early stage, right? Investing in pre-seed and only in AI companies. Historically, we've been looking for very deep technical founders
Mhm.
building in a space that sounds really hard, maybe even in a category that doesn't exist, right? They're trying to build a new category, a new industry, right? I think that we probably, or at least we are looking somewhat broader now. We still love those type of founders, right? Especially if they've done 3, 4 exits before, etc.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But typically they haven't. I'm personally very excited about the less technical or maybe even non-technical founders.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Founder,
So a lot of VCs are kind of like changing their minds, and this is an interesting question where some go with the typical technical founders and the foundations there, but now I hear people talking about very specialized folks. Like if you have somebody, and I'm making this up because I have no idea, specialized in broccoli genetics, that's the kind of guy you want to really fund because now he has the tools. Now he has what he needs to have. It's an ecosystem around that supports the creation of that new startup. In the old days, that would be like unheard of. You would need to have something completely difficult or different. But yeah, maybe in this purest sense for AI, it might be the case that you need to still to be technical. So
but
there are two
still,
worlds right now moving in AI. One, it's which I think it's no, I don't want to be biased in my answer, but let's say there's if we look at the LLMs, the big LLMs, we have the Claudes of this world. They clearly are putting great effort on having products that are intuitive and that anyone can learn. And you go to the Swedish extreme, which is Lovable, yeah,
yeah.
with a single chat box. They're getting to build products complex as Claude, but obviously they're a closed ecosystem. Where do you sit? What do you think the future is? Are we talking more like the Claudes of this world? Are we going more towards the Lovables of this world? Open, closed ecosystems? What do you think is the most interesting path?
So for me, it's clear the sort of the Claude Codex cursor of the world, but I think there is a massive industry for both of them. They're probably going to meet in the middle, and I think that over time you will be able to build amazing things, really, really advanced stuff with the Replit, Lovable, sort of that angle as well. Personally, I think that one is a bit more interesting because you can sort of really dig into the abstract layer of databases or maybe learning models or maybe encryption or stuff like that. But over time, Lovable will probably do that as well. But so that's why I personally think that's interesting. I believe that both will win, and
Yeah.
I believe that from a sort of a people perspective or democratization perspective, Lovable is the winner. Right? Lovable is the one that's putting a new tool into people that has never used technical tools before and amaze them on a daily basis on what's possible.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm that generation that experienced Adobe Flash when it was Macromedia, and now it doesn't even exist anymore. And it was the first time for folks with design background to actually play with code. It wasn't even called code. We had action scripting essentially, which is writing actions. And this is this change for a lot of designers the ability to learn to enter the world of actually coding. I think Cloud Code does that really well. Lovable is one step further. It's giving you a sense of I can build actual software without knowing absolutely anything. And that to me is the top of the Swedish flag in terms of democracy. Like this is for everybody, folks. And I find that really, really interesting. So how do we tell people to future-proof themselves? How can, because you and I are having a conversation that is highly intellectual and knowledgeable, but if we go out there to the taxi driver, the woman selling coffee in the shop, what do we tell them? How do they future-proof themselves? What's the
I
message?
think the only thing you can do as a human is to roll up your sleeve, try the stuff out, try to learn, get your curiosity up, maybe meet a couple of friends and try out the tools yourself together with them. Maybe build something in the taxi space or maybe learn something new at least, right? You're a taxi driver, that's awesome, but you're really interested in music. Maybe you can learn a lot around music, right? But the only way as a human to be on board with this shift is to use the tools. That's it. That's what I tell to all people, including my kids, right? I have 3 kids, 10, 18, and 20. Use the tools, right?
20. Anders, how old are you, man? No, no, don't tell
49,
me.
man.
You started really young.
I do. Yeah. Impatient, but no, you just need to
Sorry,
use the tools.
surprise.
You need to use the tools, man. That's the only way, and that's a surprisingly big hurdle, even for
Yeah,
people in companies and large organizations. They talk about it. Maybe they've asked ChatGPT a couple of questions, but you need to get your arms around it. You need to use the tools for whatever use case. It doesn't need to be building apps, right? It could be set up a training program for yourself on French wines, or learn a new language, or music, or art, or whatever. But you need to start using the tools, because otherwise you're clearly left behind, right? It's like you're being super late on the internet game or the smartphone game. You're not really sort of connected to the society. I think that's a big risk, and I think that this is an area where I think we need to try to, together with sort of governmental bodies in each country,
yeah.
push this. We need to incentivize people to use these tools,
I
because
heard,
otherwise, yeah, you
yeah,
have a challenge.
I agree. I heard a critic today about the fact that we're really bad in Europe to scale companies.
Mm.
Do you think that's the case for Sweden?
I don't. No, I don't. I think we are. So we have a disadvantage in the intersection of being completely sort of bonkers ambitious,
Yeah,
one axis, and then access to ridiculous amount of capital. So we
right,
have a disadvantage towards the US, and then maybe also to China, right, in that dimension.
right.
But we can scale companies. We have amazing talent. We have a bit of an advantage in the sense that we actually don't own the GPU and the LLM layer, so we need to sort of adapt and be even closer to the problem, right? We're faster to solid product market fit, and we're
Mm,
better than many other countries
mm.
and regions to actually build applications or products that people care about, because that's sort of our only wedge, right? We're
Right.
building
Yeah,
it on top of other clouds or other mobiles
yeah,
or other AI, but
yeah.
we're really, really good in that. So I disagree. I think we can scale companies. I think we can build amazing things, even though we're not maybe that crazy ambitious and
Do you think
access.
there's need for EU to change something in regards to how do we move into this new generation of builders?
It wouldn't hurt, I think, to try to unlock access to capital in a more scalable way. So there's a lot of discussion on sort of government funding. I'm not a massive fan of grants or funding from governments, right? But
Mm,
we have an enormous amounts of cash just sitting in bank accounts. So maybe
yeah.
there's a way here to activate that capital more, right?
Mm,
And very biased here, but I think there are a number of countries in Europe that could learn from Sweden in the sense of how develop and to some extent less regulated our capital markets is. So we have,
mm,
I read somewhere that we have had sort of roughly the same amount of companies listed on the stock exchange last year in Sweden as in sort of Germany, France, and UK
right.
together.
Yeah,
We have a couple of the largest private equity companies in the world. Like EQT is probably place 3 in the world,
yeah.
even though we're the size of half of London.
I know, it's crazy, but
And we
it's
have
true, it's
this
true.
sort of entrepreneurial
I mean,
and VC companies.
Sweden is the only European country that has Nasdaq North. There's nowhere in the world. Nasdaq
Yeah,
is in the US and in Sweden. This is out of
yeah.
this world.
A lot of our sort of pension money, right, that
Yeah,
everyone collects is reinvested through state funds into the stock exchange. So I think that on the European scale would free up a lot of capital
mm,
that could at least make it somewhat easier for us to
yeah,
go head to head with China
yeah.
and the US.
I believe so too, and it needs to happen. I mean, as a former entrepreneur, I saw my company in 2023. It was so painful, the whole process.
Mm.
It's and you end up in a situation where you realize that the environment here was extremely fixated on basically covering the social cost. And so if you have an investment of 100K, 50K will go on taxes and other things that are rightfully so for the kind of life that we have in Europe. But at that early stage, every euro counts. And you don't get past so easy that process until most founders get to a point that they can't breathe when they get their first funding, and then they get to the next one. You go to the US, and the environment is the other way around. They have 5-year runway with a ridiculous, and they're already racing for the next. And you're like, how is it possible that we're talking not even pears and apples? We're talking like fruits in a category and jets in the other one. It's like completely different. This is absolutely great. So one last question, Anders. What's it going to be your future? Are you going to reinvent yourself after the VC world, or?
Yeah, so for me personally, launching this fund about 2 years ago has been a big journey. I'm not the traditional VC guy. I've learned a lot. I try to meet about 10 founding teams per week, right? So I probably met about 1,000 teams now. Enjoy every single meeting a lot, right? I think it's a completely, I don't really sort of see it as work to some extent, because it's so much energy to meet these mostly young founders with this amount of energy and ambition and ingenuity. It's just amazing. So going forward, I think clearly in order to be competitive as a VC, you need to have an exceptional amount of AI in your value chain, right? Because it's a numbers game, it's a power law game, and if you're really ambitious on how you infuse AI in your value chain operations, then you can be competitive on that aspect to a number of other ones, but you can't win, right? Then you need to add your human taste or your ability to connect with founders, get to know them, hang out at their office, go to dinner, right? That's going to be the role. All this other stuff of trying to figure out whatever my DPI was last month or how my IRR is, that stuff will just be sort of automated, right? And then I think to some extent sort of deal flow and maybe scoring and deciding and whatnot. So we can automate a lot of that stuff and then just sort of hone in on how do we get to know founders? How do we figure out if it's a good fit? How can we support them post an investment? The people dimension, which is what I love, right? So I think that the direction here is probably way more automation on the boring stuff, and then a lot of time into the stuff I really love.
Very good, Anders. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, to be honest. I'm very fond of the way you're thinking. I looked at the companies that you're funding at the Foundry Ventures, and it looks amazing. You're doing a great job. Fantastic. How can people find you? Are you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find our website. You can just reach out. I have my email and telephone number on the website. Just reach out, and independent of whether you are another VC that want to team up or whether you're a founder that want to bounce off stuff, what I do is take meetings, right? Everything else I try to sort of automate away.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's half of the job, right? Take meetings.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Anders, thank you so much. It's been a really wonderful time to you, and hope to see you soon in this AI space, and hope that some of those companies you're helping out make it to the next level. So
absolutely. Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed being on the show, and best of luck to you guys as well.
All right. Thank you so much. And we're done.